Welcome to an unfortunately rainy day here at Squadaland. And I chose to start this recording in the rain because that's how I feel, because it's actually the second time I've done this whole video. First time ended up turning into a 15-minute rant session at the end, and I figured you didn't want to hear that. So let's go over, well, there'll be a mini version of that. But let's go over what's new. We're starting at the entrance, because even though we've got a brand new area to talk about, there's a few things to talk about in the entrance. I will say, if we turn to the right, we'll see two new rides over there. Well, three. The roller coaster in the back. Let's pretend that doesn't exist for a moment. So we have the Sky Flyer and the swinging ship over there. Ignore those, because they actually aren't done yet. I was just placing the rides down as trying to get a feel for what I wanted to do with those areas. So pretend they don't exist. Roller coaster, you can now start acknowledging it exists because it is actually mostly done. It's just everything else needs to be built around it. But we're going left here in the main plaza because we no longer have an empty husk of a cable car station. We actually have a station for the high wire transportation system. This station's a little weird, I acknowledge. In my head canon, the station was originally here since the park opening. And it was largely that sort of stucco, and then the brick at the bottom, the blue top. It ended up a little fancier than I intended it to, but I still think it looks pretty good. And so in my head, that was existing, and then there was a little food stand at the bottom, because there's a very similar food stand at the underneath the station for the Sky Ride at Cedar Point. So that was kind of my inspiration. And then in my head, when this entry plaza was redone in the let's say mid-2010s, they redid that food cart and added on to turn it into this Sakura grab-and-go sushi thing, which has just very limited indoor space. But that's kind of why you have two different architectural styles going on there. Overall, I kind of really like the way it looks, even though it's weird. Yes, I'm aware the flowers in Sakura grab-and-go sushi don't really look like cherry blossom petals. I just wanted something to break up the monotony of that building, so I just picked flower decorations. We're going to go left here in the Carousel Plaza because this area is actually a little more done. We filled in a little bit of the empty space on the right here. First of all, we have the high wire station with service to Midway station. Just some simple concrete ramps going into it. Nothing overly complex there. We also have the Plaza Emporium store, which the guests don't use, because guests going into stores, much like anything in this game, a lot of things in this game are bugged. But it's just, I wanted a little shop here to round out sort of this area. Didn't want to go too overboard with it because I wanted it to be sort of like an opening day thing, and this isn't technically a theme park. I'm considering it more of an amusement park, so I didn't want to go too overboard with anything. Right? So let's start walking towards the back of the park through the 50s area. And I'm going to leave this in because I think you get some nice sight lines of all the new stuff. Well, the new stuff that's finished. Just ignore the tower in the back there. Because you can start to see this view looks quite a bit different. I still haven't finished the queue line for the Hot Rod ride. Still waiting on custom supports. I just really haven't felt like doing it. But in the back there, the Dining Dash is no longer the back of the park. We have a whole new area back there. Well, new in the context of this series, technically be an opening day area of this park. I feel like I've gone over that enough times in the series that you get the idea. But we could see several new attractions waiting for us. So we're going to go ahead and start with the right as we head to the Midway area. This Midway area is heavily inspired by the county fair areas that it feels like a lot of these parks around this era, that were built around this era, have. Heroines has one. Six Flags Great America was the biggest inspiration for this area. Usually they're my least favorite area of a park because they usually have just a ton of open asphalt areas and just feel really hot and just like a collection of rides. And I kind of wanted this to still be that, which is why you have this huge asphalt area here. But I also ended up classing it up, I feel like, just a little bit. Starting here with the sideshow spin, we have this just very simple spin ride, but I decided to put a big canvas tent over the top of it, just to act as a nice little cover. Yes, I realize it's a little stupid that it's called sideshow spin, but that's technically the big top, which inherently means it's not the sideshow. I just like alliteration. We're going to go right, because there's not much to see over here, because we just have the high wire station. This is a little more what I had in mind when I was going to originally build the other station. I actually built this station first. This one looks a little more like the Skyride station at Cedar Point. I feel like it's just very simple building with some utility underneath it. We got just a simple walk-up store and then some restrooms. As I said, eventually this will lead straight up into the Sky Tower and something right here, and I don't know what that something is yet, which is why this area isn't finished. I'm mostly making this right now because I got kind of a creative block with this area, so I figured I'd just release the video. The wooden roller coaster, as you can see, goes quite a ways into the distance. We'll be riding that in a little bit. But let's head back the other way into the Midway. Start here with the jumbo wheel. Not a huge fan of this sign, and that's mostly because it's really jank. Unfortunately, we only have 2 fonts with the 3D text. But if you look at it, you may go like, that actually kind of looks 3D, though. What are you talking about? Until I keep walking and you realize it's fake. Basically, I just took the text and then just duplicated it a bunch in a row to try to give the illusion of 3D depth. And I think it looks pretty good from, like, this angle. Even this angle, it still looks a little 3D. Once you get beyond that, though, you can start to really, the illusion breaks down. But anyways, this is going to be really stupid to say, but I'm a big fan of this cover. Because it doesn't really look it. But this thing took a tremendous amount of effort, because if you look up here, those, well, actually you can see it repeating. I did get a little lazy with that, because I figured not many people are going to look at it from this angle, even though I'm showing it off right now. Each one of those wooden boards was individually placed. It's not like a wooden board piece. And same goes for all the metal slats on the roof. So yeah, I think it looks pretty good for being, like, completely manually built with no building pieces. And then also there's these little, they are Viking decorative pieces, but I noticed when I was looking at pictures of the county fair area at Six Flags Great America, a lot of, like, posts and stuff kind of have decorative flair where the vertical support beams meet the horizontal ones. And so I realized if I scaled down some of the Viking pieces and stuck them into the roof and painted them white, they actually kind of looked like a little decorative flair. A lot of the queue lines in this area aren't very well themed. This one's just a big cattle pen. Only half of it's covered, because I figure if you're on this half, you'd want to look up at the Ferris wheel instead of just the entire view from the queue line looking like this. And then in the back here, we kind of have a retaining wall. Ignore the part where the dirt's sticking through the wall. I only just noticed that. Basically, the train traveling up along there, right on cue, has sort of a raised area, but it was like cutting into this queue line. But I didn't want to just have like sheer vertical rock face because it wouldn't have looked right. So instead I have this serving as like a retaining wall / little flower garden. The train is just testing, which is why there's like 2 back-to-back there. So we're not going to like really cover a ton of it today, other than one thing, which we'll definitely get into. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Ferris wheel. And next up, we got to cover the games gallery. Now, this is something I was dreading making this area, not just for the reasons I said earlier, where these areas of the parks tend to be my least favorite, but because I knew I had to have some Midway games, and they are completely non-functional. But I feel like they need to be here because these parks just have to have these. Oops. Oh, turns out the Q and E keys rotate. Just found that out accidentally. So here we have a set of 3 Midway games, although 2 of them are just copies because I got lazy and I didn't know what to do for a 3rd one. Although that's not unheard of, because I will say I was looking at reference photos in if you ever want to design a park like this and you're using real-world inspirations, one of the best things you can do is go to Google Maps and do the walk-around view, because there's a walk-around view of a lot of parks. And so I was using that to look at the Midway games at Cedar Point, and I realized they did actually... I'm not sure if that's showing up on video. There's a lot of weird graphical glitches going on right now that I haven't seen before, including my mouse pointer randomly flashing on screen. But enough of that. So, yeah, I was looking at the Cedar Point Midway games. I realized they do have several copy and pasted. I did try and at least theme them differently. So we have the splash shooters, which are supposed to be like... These are supposed to be the little guns, and you shoot at targets, water at the targets. It's kind of supposed to be a race, but I didn't really implement that in any way. And then over here we have Super Striker, which is kind of the throw a ball at a stack of bottles thing. There aren't really anything that's a good stand-in for bottles, so I kind of just took this weird, like, hook piece, where it's like supposed to be where you attach cable to, and then I just rotated it a bunch until it made a vaguely bottle shape. I will say I did get lazy with the prizes, because they're basically just all copy and pasted and recolored. I'm just now realizing a bunch of them aren't even sitting on the shelf correctly, so I should probably fix that at some point. Yeah, we have the Super Striker, and then 5 Alarm. It's another water shooting game. But this one, I just wanted to make it at least a little bit different, so I made it... The idea would be that it's like themed to firefighting instead. And then this last one's closed because that green shelf piece is on the grid, and it would stick through the wall. And I didn't want it to stick through the wall out here. So I just decided to close this, and if we go in here, you can see that that's the shelves I had to delete. So yeah, the last one's just closed for that reason. We'll work our way down to the giant swinging ride there in a sec. Gifts and goodies. This is like one of the last buildings I made for this area, and I was just like creatively bankrupt when I made it, and I'm okay with how it turned out in the end, but this one took a lot of finagling to try and make it just not a carbon copy of any of the other buildings in the area, even though it took a lot of inspiration for the restrooms, which is actually like the first building that I built in the area, and honestly probably my favorite. But I didn't want to... I figured I'd done the pointed roof thing enough times in this area that I kind of wanted a flat roof. I'm not really the biggest fan of how it turned out, but I feel like it turned out okay in the end. I think, like, especially from like this angle, it looks fine with the like roller coaster in the background and everything. As I said, the restrooms were actually the first building I built in the entire area. Nice shot, getting all those in one throw. But yeah, I quite like these restrooms. I don't know, it's a building where I started out and I'm like, this is gonna be like a 20-minute job, and I think I spent over an hour on this building, just adding like the corner piece details and the trim. And I realized I took a bunch of sign pieces and turned them sideways to make these like wood panel details. I decided like, oh, it might be confusing. I originally just had the bathroom sign and an arrow, and I'm like, that might make it look like the bathrooms are like on that side. So then I added text that says bathrooms around the corner. Ended up being the whole thing. Overall, quite like how those bathrooms turned out. Once again, following the pathing thing that I talked about in the last episode, you can tell, not just by looking at the ride, but by looking at the paving around it, that this is our legally required... This is the area that the corporate overlords... Or this is the ride that the corporate overlords just threw wherever it would fit in the park, and it fit right here. Ride. So this has nothing to do with the county fair theme. I don't know why it's called Venom. I just thought it sounded cool. There is a little bit of customness to the 3D text here, because I wanted it to have like fangs and the V and the M, as stupid as that sounds. There weren't any pieces that I could find that would make it work. So instead I just combined the two different 3D fonts we had to make them a little more different than just the same font that's used everywhere else in the park. But yeah, it's just a big Huss Frisbee. Not much to say other than it's got another one of those garden retaining walls in the back. And just a very dead simple queue with some umbrellas. The color scheme on this was actually because this was being built right as King Dakar was... It may have already been closed, but it was just on my mind for some reason around the time I was building this, so I just stole its color scheme basically, and I think it looks good. I don't know. I weirdly like the way this looks in this area of the park, even though it doesn't really fit. It just kind of makes it a little less white and one note. So yeah, I ended up liking this ride, even though it's just very, very simple. In fact, I don't even think it has 100% scenery rating, which most rides in the park do. On the opposite side, we have the food fair. This is directly inspired by the food court in the county fair area at Six Flags Great America. I kind of wanted it to both look cheap and also kind of nice. So it kind of has, you can see the same Viking pieces up there serving as sort of like decorative fence posts. I wanted it to have a sign with a flare. But at the same time, it is also kind of just a food court, and so it does kind of have like tacky signs indicating what each area is serving. And then we got seating over here, all with that same little... Oops. Actually, well, I just realized, yeah, from this angle you can actually see what Viking pieces I used. They're all just dragons. But if we go back over here, I did a little better job, I think, hiding them, hopefully? Yes. And so I think they serve a little better, read a little better over here as what I was going for. Just a little decorative flair. Oh, and once again, the roof for this is not a roof piece. It is that same metal slab. So each of those slabs were like individually copied and pasted. I'm deliberately not turning to the left because there's something I want to talk about, but I can't do it while the train is passing. Anyways, back that way. This is where the pathing meets up with the big rock mine train that we covered in the last episode. We do have one final new ride to talk about here, which is the Flying Cannonball roller coaster. But before we get to that, you'll notice the paving around this looks very similar to the paving around Venom. The idea is that the original the Flying Cannonball's heavily inspired by the American Eagle roller coaster at Six Flags Great America. I kind of like I just like these areas having these parks having a big white roller coaster, probably built in the 70s or 80s. I don't know, I think it just really ties them together. And the American Eagle at Six Flags Great America has like a massive queue because it's got to go like underneath the river, the roller coaster tracks, then over the railroad tracks, and then they built a kids area where the original queue was, so it's got to go all the way around that. And it's very funny because while I was building this, weirdly that became a topic on the roller coaster subreddit, that exact queue, as I was building sort of a weird thing inspired by it. Well, I was going to say a weird thing inspired by it. The exit's kind of inspired by it. In my headcanon, the entrance for this ride would have been right here, except they ended up redoing it and adding this railroad crossing instead, because eventually there will be either a new big ride or a new big area out here. I haven't decided whether it's going to be just one ride or an entire area. There is a railroad crossing. Yes, it works, and we're going to get into how, because boy, it was a battle to get that running. And honestly, it's why I'm recording this twice, because I went into way too much detail in the first version. But anyways, before we get into that, let's talk about the Flying Cannonball. I quite like this sign. It's 2D text, but I didn't want to do the same 3D effect as before, so instead I added a bunch of poles to the back of it. Just to make it a little more make sense why it's floating in front of the sign. And then we have just 3 circle pieces inlaid to give it sort of a 3D color. And then there's a shooting star decoration, which I use as like the motion of the cannonball. There's a very similar icon, which I actually designed first, which is on the front of each car. Queue line. Oh, once again, my weird obsession with making the pathing in this park makes sense. I had talked about how they had redone the queue for this ride at some point. I added a little nod to that where you could tell where the pathing changes color from the more freshly paved darker, more vibrant color, and then it transitions to a more faded color when it hits the ride's original queue. Gotta squeeze past everyone because it's actually the newest ride in the park in terms of the save file, not in terms of my headcanon. I'm gonna walk all the way up here. Before we get on the ride, we'll take a look. There's my sign. This is the first time I've actually attached scenery to a roller coaster car, so I went ahead and attached a logo to the front of it. Let me try and... For some reason, the click to ride is not working for this ride, and I don't know what... Oh, because I think I do it from back here. Yeah, it's weird. And I want to pause, because I just want to make sure that I am in bumper view. And I don't know how much longer this is going to take to load. So, oh! Perfect timing. So yeah, once again, I did not really use the smoothing tool on this, because in my head, I'm trying to make it so that if I'm designing a older roller coaster, which would have been made before they designed roller coasters with computers, I'm trying to limit my use of the smoothing tool to sort of give it a little bit of jank. Whereas with, say, the inverted coaster we talked about last time, because that would have been designed with computers, that's when I really am going to go into detail about making it as smooth as possible, using the smoothing tool to its full advantage, heartlining it, doing the whole 9 yards. But yeah, obviously, this is actually probably the last ride I'm making for this park that would have been built in the era before computers were used to design these. And so this ride does seem a little jank, but it is what it is. You can see out there that I have a lake that this runs along, and the lake will serve a big part of the rest of the park here as we're building. This ride does have some pretty good airtime. I think it pulls negative 5 Gs. I think it does that a couple of times. Some pretty solid airtime, not the most intense in the world, but these rides tend not to have the most intense airtime in the world because they just aren't the insane modern Rocky Mountain Coaster, Intamin Woody sort of insane airtime machines. But yeah, it's got pretty good airtime. So plenty of negative Gs. Should be flying out of your, or at least floating out of your seat on a lot of these hills. Not this one though. But yeah, just a very simple out and back layout. As you go through here, you'll see a lot of steel beams. That is because I actually had to... we can actually just exit the walking. I forgot if I hit exit, it actually dumps me out at the exit. Let's head back there. So I actually did make a lot of custom supports, because if I delete these, you'll see that this is how it originally was supported, where the supports just ended above the roller coaster track, which I really just kind of found unacceptable. In retrospect, I don't think every one of these cross ties would need a steel support beam going across, but at least a few would. So I decided to include them. But honestly, I think I did a pretty good job adding supports to this, because obviously there's a lot of little details, like I don't have nuts and bolts. Technically, if you really look at it, some of these wooden pieces aren't actually connected to anything, which I should probably fix, but I'm probably too lazy, and I think it reads fine from the distance you'll be seeing it most of the time. But yeah, I think that looks pretty good for being a bunch of custom supports. And a train's coming along. Just going to go ahead and transition to the next topic, and kind of the last feature of this area that I wanted to talk about. We're just going to follow it along here. The train is only being tested. I think I said that earlier. I still haven't made its station, because I'm still not sure if the stations are placed properly. But the train's coming up to our railroad crossing. And the arms actually go down, which the guests completely ignore, because there's no way to make them do that, because railroad crossings are just really just disable collision. You may go, oh, okay, whatever. There's rotational pieces in the game. I've covered it in the past because the sign uses rotational pieces. Turns out the way the rotational pieces work on this game don't work the way that I thought they would, and it kind of pisses me off. This ended up being a project and a half to do, because I've actually, before we've done this, I've actually gone ahead and duplicated this because it makes it way easier to talk about if we go over here and look at a duplicate. So if I were to say, edit this, my animation types are default, which causes it to spin, static, which causes it not to move at all, and I don't know what the point of it is. Then you got a bunch of speeds, and that's all for just a spin rate. You've got a quarter chop and a quarter chop reverse, and a quarter oscillate, and a half chop. So those are like, these quarter options, rotate it a quarter of a circle, and then rotate it back. You may go and think, perfect, that's what you should use. Unfortunately, you don't get to control how long it's down for when you do that, and it's only down for like 1 second, which doesn't really work for a railroad crossing. And so I'm like, okay, well, that sucks. I'll just have to make it so that it rotates with like a medium speed, and then I'll use a sequencer to then have it rotate in reverse, and then like basically have it rotate, stop, and then rotate back. You can't do that. You can only just say, this rotates at medium speed. And when you throw it in the sequencer, it does like, I don't know, 3 full rotations or so. And you don't have any control over how many times it rotates. Or how far it rotates. So what I had to do is, you see we have 2 rotating pieces here. And they're both flipped from each other. And they both rotate medium. Because that's another thing is that's really just super great about this game is if I go into here, you'll see there's a medium and a medium reverse option. You think, oh, medium reverse is just medium in reverse, right? They're technically 2 different speeds, and so you can't use medium reverse if you want to have a reverse medium. You have to flip this around to face the other way and have it set to medium. But anyways, you may think like, okay, why are there 2 arms? Well, as I said before, I wanted to rotate a quarter, stay down for a little bit, and then rotate back a quarter. But I can't control how long it's down for, which is still technically true. And I also can't get it to stop at a quarter. So what I have in the sequencer here is this rotating piece is the parent this rotating piece is attached to this rotating piece, and then this arm is attached to this rotating piece, so that if we go into the sequencer, this rotating piece starts rotating just before this one, which rotates in the opposite direction, and so they cancel each other out for long enough that it actually comes to a stop. Kind of. It bounces a little bit. And so then eventually one of them starts waking up again and going faster than the other one, and eventually they both return to normal. That was a pain in the ass to fucking figure out. And I really wish that I could just have it rotate a quarter and then go back, or stay down as long as I want it to, and then go back. And I'm going to be honest, the fact that that's not a feature makes all of the plans that I had for this in the future basically null and void, and it really fucking sucks, and I think this is barely usable. I hate this feature. But it gets worse. Because you may look at this and you may go, okay, there's 2 of these, but there's 2 of these side by side. If we go back over here, there's only 1 of these rotating pieces. I thought you said you needed to parent these. Well, you see, they don't have to be touching. They just have to be perfectly in line with each other. Out here in Timbuktu, 1,700 feet away, is the other one. And sure enough, if we select the other one, about 1,300 feet in the other direction is the other rotator. And that's what it required to get a simple railroad crossing to work. Kind of. I hate this. I hate that I had to do that. I hate that it bounces. I'm proud of the fact that I eventually got it to work, which also there's a little bit of ingenuity that I'm proud of, which is that the crosses on here are actually just the 2D text / duplicated a bunch to give it a little bit more thickness. It doesn't 100% look right, but it looks right enough. I think this looks neat. I'm proud of the fact that it kind of sort of works if you squint. I hate that I have to have a random rotating thing a mile away to get this to work. I wish I could use one rotating thing that just rotates as much as I want it to. I tell it to stop, and I tell it to go the other way. Just me talking about that makes me really want to rant. This video is already long enough, and in the previous version of this video, this rant went on for another 15 minutes. Basically, it boils down to the fact that this game's barely functional. There's just so many weird problems. Between every time I load the game, I have to dismiss the fact that everyone doesn't have a break, even though I've turned brakes off. Every time I load the game, 2 employees are chosen at random to just get fucking teleported to here. Even though they're supposed to run a ride, and then they have to walk through the entire park to get back to their ride, and the queue is paused the entire time they're gone, and no one else will take it. I hate the fact that this cable car stops every few seconds, even though I can't figure out why, because it's not like they're, like, loading wheelchair guests, which is why the Skyliner at Disney World stops a lot. There's just so many. I've had a few times. I'll insert a picture, hopefully now, if I remember, of the time where I had a glitch where a bunch of guests got frozen underneath this ride, and so the drop tower just started dropping on their heads, and they weren't reacting because they were just stuck. Because guests just randomly get stuck on rides. I also had this roller coaster randomly just stop right here and never move again, even though it wasn't broken down, until I closed it and reopened it several times. This game's barely functional, I swear to God. But that's enough about that. Oh, actually, before I go, let's take a look at this area at night. Overall, I am pleased with how this area is turning out. Mostly turned out. There's only a couple little things left over here. I was really afraid with how this was going to look as I was working on it. And overall, I am very pleased with how it turned out. I think it looked better than I expected it to. Not the most exciting theme, but... Oops, my railroad lights are on. Oh, that is one thing I wanted to show. These lights are a little weird because even when lights are off in this game, they still look like they're on, but if I play the trigger sequence, the 2 lights do actually alternate between off and on, back and forth. It's barely noticeable now that I have these lampposts in, but it does happen. I don't know why they're a little out of sync, but they are, but whatever. But anyways, that's enough about that. Hopefully you appreciate the amount of stupid engineering that had to go into the one thing I wanted to say is why have a railroad crossing at all? Why not have the path go over the railroad? That's because eventually my plans for the future were to have a path that goes under the roller coaster here and across the railroad tracks, which would connect to the water park, which is back here. I didn't want to make the railroad go up and over because it would have looked weird. I didn't want to have the path go like underground or try and go like up and over the railroad, but then underneath the roller coaster. It just would have been way too messy and complex. Real parks have railroad crossings. Cedar Point has railroad crossings in their park for the path. So yeah, I just kind of just went with that instead. And so I figured as long as I'm going to need one anyway, I might as well have a second one that I need out here. Anyways, enough about that. So yeah, that's how this park is going. I don't know when the next update will be because I don't know when I'm going to break through my creative block. Next update, though, should be this whole stretch of the park, I would think. A couple major attractions in my head will be going in there, in addition to at least these 2 flat rides, if not one other one. But yeah, park is still chugging along. We're now 120 or so hours in. And no end in sight. That's not true. I'd say we're probably about half done with my plans, if not a little over half, because my plan is that I'll fill this out, probably fill this out Yeah, the thing that has a long ride time keeps stopping in the middle of it. Shut up. Fill this out. That'll be it for the theme park, and the water park will go right here. And I think I'll do the water park, start work on the water park after I fill this area out. So this area, with the major attraction that this leads to, will be last. Anyways, that's enough about that. Thank you very much for watching. If you've sat through this long-winded rant tour, so to speak. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you next time, whenever it is. Bye.